just a forest burning. This is almost a cemetery because all you can see is dead.
The biggest problem now facing the world is climate change.
Greenland has impacts all around the planet. 1 billion tons of ice lost here raises sea levels all over the world.
If we don't figure out how to do something about this and pretty quickly, we're going to hit a catastrophic tipping point.
It is just terrifying, really, how absolutely endless the line of fire is.
The climate crisis is the biggest crisis humanity has ever faced, and yet it has been ignored for decades.
Climate change is happening now, not in the future nor in the past. Rising temperatures are causing phenomena such as loss of sea ice and ice sheet mass, sea level rise, longer and more intense heat waves, and shift in plant and animal habitats. Understanding such a long-term climate trends is essential for the safety and quality of human life, allowing humans to adapt to changing environment in ways such as planting different crops, managing our water resources, and preparing for extreme weather events. Earth's global average surface temperature in 2020 tied with 2016 as the warmest year on record. According to analysis by NASA, the last 7 years have been the warmest 7 years on record, typifying the ongoing and dramatic warming trend, said GISS Director Gavin Schmidt. Whether 1 year is a record or not is not really that important. The important things are long-term trends. With these trends, and as the human impact on climate increases, we have to expect that records will continue to be broken.
As far as the eye can see, Antarctica is covered by thick sheets of ice. In some places, that ice is several miles deep. This massive continent, as big as the US and Mexico combined, has for millions of years been home to some of the most breathtaking examples of ice on the planet.
What you can see behind me here is a very good cross-section of a glacier in Antarctica. And what you can see with all of those different layers, that is hundreds and thousands of years of snowfall and precipitation stacking up one on top of the other and slowly exerting pressure downward on those layers of snow. And that's basically how a glacier is formed.
But Antarctica's ice is now increasingly being threatened, and most researchers believe it's because of climate change. According to one recent study, the continent's ice is slipping away 6 times faster than it was 40 years ago.
Understanding how the Antarctic ice sheet will respond to the anthropogenic climate change is not a straightforward problem, but accurate projections are required to help societies prepare for impacts such as sea level rise. This requires knowledge of which areas of Antarctica will retreat, as well as the duration and rates of change, which in turn requires an integration of observational and modeling knowledge from all Earth system-based scientific disciplines. A recent article published in Reviews of Geophysics has compiled this information, including interaction of the Antarctic ice sheet with atmosphere and ocean, the solid Earth response to changing ice mass, and records of past changes in the ice and ocean. Records of how the ice sheet responded to the past climate change can provide insights into the critical process involved in Antarctic ice sheet change and the associated sea level rise. For example, they have been used to improve how physical processes are represented in ice sheet models that simulate retreat. The rate of current climate change is much higher than observed in past periods of natural climate forcing. However, past events of rapid sea level rise were commonly characterized by rates of up to 1.4 meters per century.
All over the world, some stunning transformations, from choked streets in India becoming calmer and easier to breathe in, to the most famous landmark in China suddenly looking clearer, to the centre of Paris, often polluted, now quieter and cleaner. The fight against the virus has slowed down many economies at huge cost, but it's also done wonders for the air and for the carbon emissions that are heating up the planet. The drop in traffic is a major part of that, here in the UK and globally. Lower demand for electricity has also made a difference, along with the grounding of planes. Fewer flights means less carbon released into the air. It's a pattern seen around the world. The lighter the shade here, the bigger the decline in emissions. In some countries, up again, but still a huge change.
The fall in emissions we're seeing, 17% per day, is enormous. We haven't experienced something like this before, as far as we can tell. It's driven by changes in road transport.
But now that China's out of lockdown, traffic there is building up, so emissions are rising once again. The carbon cut is not permanent.
Optimism had prevailed when the lockdown was announced. Observers believed that the shutting down of all economic activities to curb the spread of the virus would bring down the greenhouse gas or GHG emissions. The belief, however, was only a blip in the long-term GHG emission trends. As the latest state of the Global Climate Provisional Report by World Meteorological Organization found, it was published December 1, 2020. The report stated that the reduction in GHG gases will be practically indistinguishable from the natural interannual variability, driven largely by the terrestrial biosphere. It added that the real-time data from specific locations indicated increasing levels of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide in 2020. CO2, CH4, and N2O are the three primary GHGs that causes anthropogenic global warming. N2O seems to be becoming the next big concern in terms of its increasing concentration in atmosphere and global warming potential. The year is on course to become the third warmest year on record. The record heat in 2020 has been despite near La Niña conditions prevailing in the equatorial Pacific Ocean since August and moderate La Niña conditions prevailing since late September. In fact, the WMO report in July stated that one of the next 5 years may be witness the global average temperatures of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. There is 20% possibility of the event. The report titled The Global Annual to Decadal Climate Update added that the global average temperature rise would likely to be above 1 degree Celsius in each of the next 5 years.
Are downright apocalyptic images coming out of Australia right now as the country's battling hundreds of fires that have burned across the country for months now.
Watch 38 coming in.
While the bushfires in Australia were kicked off by elements mostly out of human control, their unprecedented magnitude did not come out of nowhere. It's consistent with years of trends, studies, and climate modeling, facts known to Australian politicians for decades. But this is not just about Australia. What happened there is merely a painful warning of what is yet to come. Fires of this magnitude will happen again, anywhere, anytime. Conservationists in Australia are already working to restore the areas that were damaged. In January, Ecosia users funded more than 26,000 trees to restore some of the areas that were burned down. But with a warming planet come uncontrollable extreme climate events. And with extreme climate events comes an unprecedented challenge to life on Earth as we have known it so far.
Being the smallest continent and one of the largest countries on Earth, Australia has set a national goal of reducing greenhouse gas emission by 5% below 2000 levels by 2020. In November 2011, Australian lawmakers approved an ambitious carbon trading plan, the world's largest outside of Europe. Under the plan, Australia's 500 worst polluters will be forced to pay a tax on every ton of carbon they emit, starting in July 2012.
These are the images Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro does not want you to see. He says the fires that have been affecting the Amazonia region happened in deforested areas, but this place proves him wrong.
This is the Chapada de Guimarães National Park in the state of Mato Grosso. It's 32,000 hectares of protected territory. The problem now is that 11% of it has been devastated by the fire.
It is said that Brazil is aiming to reduce its emission to 1994 levels and cut deforestation by 80% from historic highs by 2020. Brazil's National Climate Change Plan is focused on expanding renewable electric energy sources and beefing up the use of biofuels in transportation industry. The country is also focusing heavily on reducing deforestation rates. It's hoping to eliminate illegal deforestation and bring the net loss of forest coverage to zero by 2015.
No matter how urgently you see the issue of climate change, this might have been a scary week for you. Canadians woke up on April 1st, no less, to a warning from federal scientists. This country is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. Turns out, being a northern country, no joke. But also, in 4 provinces, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick, the federal government imposed a carbon tax.
According to Canadian government report released in mid-2011, emissions from tar sands will more than cancel out the progress that Canada has made in shifting its electricity generation from coal to natural gas. By 2020, the report projects that Canada will fall well short of its stated emission reduction targets.
Air travel is a major source of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions, and China doesn't show any signs to cut theirs. The country is already the world leader in CO2 production, with just under 10 million tons of carbon dioxide a year. That's almost a third of all global man-made CO2 each year.
China hasn't made any pledges to reduce its carbon emissions. As its economy grows, emission will increase. But China has promised to become at least 40% more energy efficient by 2015. China is the world's biggest producer and consumer of coal, and the #1 emitter of greenhouse gases and the 2nd largest consumer of energy. But it's also a developing nation, which means that like other developing nations, it isn't required to lower its emission under the Kyoto Protocol. Even so, many analysts warn that weaning China off coal won't be easy.
India is oscillating between severe heat waves and drought, heavy rain and floods. Climate change is now wreaking havoc in the world's 2nd most populous nation.
Very high rainfall and therefore water coming into the rivers is increasing.
More than 1,000 people have lost their lives and tens of thousands have been rendered homeless.
It takes away livelihoods, takes away assets of people, destroys everything that has been built over years.
But are these seasonal phenomena becoming worse as the years go by? Can India mitigate the adverse impact of climate change without jeopardizing its economic growth objectives? And how long can the poor bear the brunt of the devastation caused by the extreme weather events?
India is the world's #3 emitter of greenhouse gases, but because it's a developing nation, it isn't required to cut emission under the Kyoto Protocol. That said, India is an active participant in the Clean Development Mechanism, a carbon offset plant set up under the Kyoto Protocol. Basically, the CDM lets developing nations like India earn credits for implementing emission-reducing projects. India can sell those credits to an industrialized nation, which can count them towards its overall emission reduction commitment. India has hundreds of CDM projects, almost half of them focus on wind power and biomass. Out of all these countries trying their best on supporting movements and doing such things to help our dying environment, Denmark topped the list of countries doing the most to protect the environment, continuing to set ambitious goals, among them having at least half its energy consumption come from renewables by 2030 and to be independent of fossil fuels by 2050.
To stop global temperatures rising by more than 2 degrees, greenhouse gas emissions need to fall by 2.5% every year until they reach zero. In the UK, that means cutting our emissions by 12 million tonnes in the first year. So what can we do? If every person in the UK planted a tree, we'd each cut carbon dioxide emissions by 2 kilograms per year. Added together, that's 128,000 tonnes of CO2. You can make a bigger difference by recycling. Every household in the UK which recycles saves 91 kilograms of carbon dioxide. If every household recycled, we'd save 2.4 million tonnes. Switching to energy-saving light bulbs saves 120 kilograms per household. That's 3.2 million tonnes of CO2 if every home in the UK followed suit. We can also help cut the energy used in the treatment of wasted water. If we all turned off the tap when brushing our teeth, we'd cut 7.9 million tonnes from the UK's emissions. None of those examples would require a huge change in lifestyle, but if we all did all of them, we'd save 13.6 million tonnes of CO2, and we'd beat our target of reducing emissions by 2.5% in the first year. Beyond that, things get a little more drastic. Giving up your car would make a huge difference. The average motorist creates 2 tonnes of CO2 per year, and there are 35 million cars on the road. If we all gave up our cars, that's 70 million tonnes. If you don't fancy that, what about giving up meat? If you went veggie, you'd save 1,241 kilograms of CO2 per year. If the whole country did it, we'd save 79 million tonnes of CO2, more than 16% of our total carbon emissions. Too drastic? Well, even giving up beef would make a big impact. Producing beef creates 5 times more greenhouse gas emissions than any other meat. So, could you give up that steak to help save the planet?
But what can us individuals do? For sure, there are hundreds or even thousands of ways we can do in order to stop climate change. But which is the best and possible way? Use your voice. Talk to your friends and family, and make sure your representatives are making good decisions. By voicing your concerns via social media, or better yet, directly to your elected officials, you send a message that you care about the warming world. Encourage Congress to enact new laws that limit carbon emissions and require polluters to pay for the emissions they produce. The main reason elected officials do anything difficult is because their constituents make them. Make your voice heard, and same goes with billions of people around the world.
But how can youths like us help stop climate change? Some youths are not rich to sponsor various environmental programs or projects. Some are not influential people who can invite many people. Some are just ordinary students. But keep in mind that all these notions are not required in order to help fight climate change. Youths can help stop climate change in their own simple yet purposeful ways, such as joining environmental organizations or groups, participating in various governmental, non-governmental school or community programs and projects against climate change, joining cleanup drives at school or in community, participating in tree planting and Go Green activities, garbage picking and recycling initiatives, getting involved in environmental protests and campaigns, using social media like Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and promoting climate change and environmental awareness to the public, limiting the use of plastics, helping report illegal activities to the authorities, walking or biking in short distances instead of riding fueled vehicles, segregating garbage at home, and lastly, encouraging our friends, schoolmates, and our family to do what we are doing. Doing those things can help mitigate climate change. Today, we should realize that we have a moral responsibility towards our environment and our planet. Stopping climate change is not easy, but if we work together as one, our micro efforts will have a macro effect on our environment and our planet. The survival of every living being on Earth depends on how we handle our environment. We humans are the highest form of beings, so we are to blame if things go wrong in our planet. So to us and to all the youths around the world, let us act now. Let us be involved in this fight. As a young generation, let us help the former generation in shaping our environment. Our voice matters and our life matters. We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. So what are we waiting for? Let us stand together in stopping climate change.